Heyo guys, my name is BetaEtaDelota, or Beta, and welcome to the follow-up video on my official guide to the furry fandom, Mom, Dad, I'm a Furry. Wow, that was a really clean intro. So before you even ask why I'm doing a follow-up video on what was supposed to be the perfect informational guide to the furry fandom, let me give a little bit of context. So originally, I started that video at around September of that last year. I went into making the video expecting, hey, I'm not looking for this to go big, I just want to help some people, whether it be to explain the furry fandom to friends, co-workers, or family members, or for people who are just discovering the fandom to figure it out for themselves. At the time, there were only really articles explaining what the furry fandom was, and even some of those weren't even that accurate, like not even close. So that's where I came in. And a year after releasing, which is now, it did a lot better than I thought. Not just statistically in terms of ad revenue or views, but in terms of actually helping people. We'll get a bit more into that point later, but I got a lot of questions about if I was going to do a follow-up to that video. And I thought about it for a good few months, which is when I started talking to the moms of furries about doing potentially a collaboration. And that's where we are today. As a follow-up to the Mom, Dad, I'm a Furry video, I wanted to give this video a realistic touch. I didn't want to talk for a few minutes in front of character stills, edit the whole thing, and then have someone come on for a little bit to talk and then end it. As much as I like doing that, I really wanted this to be different. And that's why what you're going to be watching today is an interview that I had with the moms of furries, which if you don't know who they are, don't worry about it. You'll get to see in a little bit. All their links are down below if you want to learn more about them as well. But what we ended up doing was just having a conversation about the furry fandom and asking each other questions from our different perspectives. The moms of furries are both furries themselves and parents of furries that are involved in the fandom, and I'm more or less the in-between for that. We went into it with the idea of what more can we teach you guys or relay off of from that first video. I don't want to hold you guys up here too long because we've got like 30 minutes to 40 minutes for an interview, and I want you guys to enjoy it. So without wasting any more time, let's get on to the interview. Today I have some very special guests. I want to do a video with the moms of furries as sort of a follow-up to my video on Mom, Dad, I'm a Furry, sort of the intro guide to the furry fandom. And I'm talking with them right now. Moms, if you want to introduce yourself to everyone.
Hi, I'm Carrie.
I'm Joelle. We're the moms of furries.
Our kids are furries, and we got into the fandom just to really support them. We went to a convention and fell in love with it. And our goal with being in the fandom is not only to have fun, because we do, but just to help support other people and help people learn that the fandom is great and nothing to feel weird about.
Yeah.
We've actually had parents come to us with questions and just want to talk a little bit about the fandom. So
sure, but we definitely are out there making sure everybody's got water.
There you go. So if you want to start, we have the couple of questions. I know you guys had a chance to read through all of them, and we can kind of get started with that. Do you have any like point anything you want to add on your end, or any questions for me before we sort of officially start this?
I am curious what the thought process was that you had when you were thinking about the first friend that you tell, or which friends do you tell, knowing that in the community, friends will talk to each other. So if you tell one person, it really means 5 people are going to hear it. So how do you decide to rip that Band-Aid off, and who is the person that's going to get that information the first time?
That's a very good point to make, and I've gotten several questions about this exact thing, about wanting to tell a certain friend or not knowing whether or not you should tell your friend or friend group about what you're into or what you enjoy, because you don't know how they're going to react or what their initial presumption about the fandom is. So it really is a matter of how well you know them and how willing to be open you are. I was in the environment where I could talk to fellow adults, most of my friends being 18 or older. Unfortunately, not too many people have that. So honestly, the best thing is to kind of gauge how your friends or the people you know are. It really is a guessing game, and it's kind of taking a chance. But honestly, if you know your friends and if they trust you and if you trust them, then I think it'll work out.
Well, I think another point is if you have some information to kind of back up some positive points to the fandom, probably is going to help if they come at you with a negative perspective.
And that's a great place for science, is very helpful.
Right. or just the charity or anything like that you can kind of show something that's relatable.
Yeah,
I agree.
And I know that it is hard to kind of gauge at first what your friends might think of the fandom beforehand. You can't just be like, oh, what do you guys think of furries, without them immediately like thinking, why is he asking, sort of thing. You know, it's really hard to gauge that, because everyone has their own reasons for liking or disliking things, whether they have limited knowledge on it or they just have a past experience with it. And I've touched upon it multiple times in other videos. The most important thing you can do is gauge the personality that your friends have and how they are and what they think of things. If they're more into the edgy, I guess, cringy stuff, they might not have the best opinion of furries. It really depends on how well you know your friends. I guess from there, we could start off with a couple of the questions that I had that I definitely wanted to start off with, which kind of backpedals off of what we just discussed, talking to friends or even parents about your initial interest in the fandom, like kind of revealing that to them. So one of the questions that I had, because I've gotten this a lot, is about, I guess, coming out as a furry. What a lot of my audience has phrased it as is coming out, not really telling your parents I'm a furry, but coming out, revealing it. I guess I don't want to assume it's the same thing, because it isn't the same thing, but the way they kind of see it as is kind of similar to coming out as being gay or lesbian or having this other interest that your parents might not have a great reaction for. So that's why you might want to sit them down and talk to them about this. I kind of wanted to gauge your guys' thoughts on this, kind of taking into, like, I guess the severity of it. Like, is it as in-depth as it is coming out? Because I know the community has a great support for this as well. So
I do too.
Well, we feel like this is something really important to address, because although it's not the same as coming out as LGBTQ plus, it can be a really big deal. Like, it's misunderstood, the fandom.
And I think that that's why people see it as coming out, because the people that don't understand the fandom automatically so often think that it is fetish, which is sexual, and they might see that as coming out as being in a fetish or having a fetish. So I think that that's where it stems from. But and we used to say coming out. I mean, we didn't know, and it was an education for us. I think that's been part of our journey, but really that's an opportunity to have a conversation, and it really is a hobby, and the difference between coming out with an orientation or an identification or I have a hobby.
But some parents may be better equipped to deal with a child that's coming out as gay than furry, which is weird, but the furry fandom is very misunderstood. I feel like it's starting to evolve a little bit, but I think in our culture, we're a little bit better prepared as parents to kind of talk about and understand your child coming out as gay, as opposed to like wanting to dress up in furry costumes and who knows what they do.
Right.
You know, at those things.
I was with you with gay. I was with you. And now you want to do furry. I'm out.
Well,
or it's hard for me.
We had a mother come to us at a convention that said that. She specifically said, I had an easier time accepting my child as coming out as gay, as opposed to when he said, oh, I'm also a furry. That weirded her out. So,
and how do I tell my friends?
Right. So it shouldn't be the same, because they're different things. One is a hobby and one is a very personal thing that could be an aspect that they need to support you in your life.
And from the parental perspective, we have a fear of being judged. We are judged so frequently as parents, as moms specifically. So, you know, to say my child is a furry on Facebook, for instance, would be as scary for a lot of parents as it would be to say, like, oh, well, my child has decided not to go to college and they're going to join the circus. What are people going to say? How will I be judged?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. And I think it's hard for parents to move out of that comfort zone where, you know, and it's funny though, if you can I think if you come at it more like, hey, this is a hobby I'm into, and liken it to things that parents are used to hearing, Comic-Con, cosplay, role play games, like things
art, music, philanthropy.
Right. If you come at it from things that parents are more already comfortable with, then maybe that's better than calling it. It doesn't have to be a serious sit down situation. So that's what we think.
Yeah. And that's actually like what I wanted to kind of touch upon in a future video about, you know, just, I guess, the concept of coming out as a furry, because it really isn't that severe to an extent, but to the person who is doing it, it's like a very big passion. And like stated in
particularly when you're young, it can feel very big.
Yeah. And even talking about it from the First Science article, you know, with kids picking up interests or hobbies that, you know, they don't really know about or don't really know too many people that are into it. There's kind of that fear that like, this is something that I shouldn't be interested in, but I really do like it. And I want to at least kind of like tell people about it to an extent.
Yeah.
And that's how I was. Even though I wasn't in the furry fandom, I had my sort of, I guess, phase, even though the furry fandom isn't a phase. I had my phases of being into certain communities or other fandoms, and I obviously didn't tell anyone about it because I was kind of embarrassed about it. Like, it was abnormal, it was kind of, to some extent, an unhealthy latch, but the furry fandom isn't that. It's a hobby. And when, like, the example that I usually go with is if you sit down and talk to your parents of, like, being like, hey, Mom, I have something to tell you, or Dad, I have something to tell you, and be like, I'm a furry, they don't fully know what that is. They're kind of expecting like, oh, he's going to come out as, you know, whatever, I'm ready for that. And it's like, I'm a furry. It's like, what is that?
Right.
And then they just go to Google and then they see the first article from like Vice and it's like, no, that's not what this is. It's not what it is at all. And that's like sort of the first stepping stone. You want that first impression to be good, and you don't want a sort of negative impulsive reaction to it. And that's what can happen if you do to some extent come out in that manner. So
Well,
that's
I feel
why
like you're setting your parents up to have a negative reaction or a big reaction, whether it's positive or negative. When you sit them down and say, I have something to talk to you about, you set parents up like, oh no, what am I going to hear? What's going to happen? When you're just like, hey, look at this drawing that I did or I like or whatever, and kind of talk about it. I think that's a great point.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you treat it as like a hobby and such and treat it as a chill thing, then others around you will treat it as a chill thing. If you make a big deal about it and think of it as like a big thing, which again, to a lot of newer people in the fandom, it is a big thing. It's very important. And it's this big, wondrous world that they don't really know about to some extent. So telling people about it might be hard. So obviously having that sort of laid back, relaxed aspect about it will kind of set your parents up for the tone of what they should be expecting.
Right. Sure. Anytime you tell somebody, oh, I need to talk to you about something, it puts them their guard up.
You kind of look for worst case scenario and go from there. But also it can be a hobby and an interest and be very important to you. Like it can be both. So
it can be a career. It can.
But what I mean is like you can introduce it lightly as a hobby, but that doesn't mean it lacks importance to the person.
Yeah.
To
very, very
so you can do both.
Yeah, and the thing about like just with the furry fandom, with being involved in it, is I tell people all the time that do you really have to like come out to your parents or your friends as a furry? But to get involved with the furry fandom, it kind of is required, especially at a young age when you want to go to these meets or conventions and you want to become more involved in the community and charities. You kind of have to be either 18 or older, or you have to have a parent or a friend who can take you, especially if it's your first time going to these meets or events. I would never encourage someone to go on their own and do it the way I did. That's always hard.
So overwhelming.
Well, in conventions, most of them you have to have a parent or guardian with you or an affidavit if you're a certain age. If you're a minor, there are things in place. So you kind of have to talk to your parents if you want to go to conventions.
Registration and all of that. And really it's the better thing to do anyway, but you're absolutely right. It's not possible to do on your own. You want to commission a suit, something like that.
So I guess that kind of moves on to the next two questions that I kind of wanted to ask you guys. Is there anything else you might want, I guess, parents to know about their like child's interest outside of what I've said, like the hobby aspect or the charity and philanthropy aspect, but also the con aspect of like how should parents understand, or even how should kids approach parents about wanting to go to this big convention? Obviously, if they're very protective of their like little sweet child, they might not want them going around at a convention or a big environment where they don't really know people. It's a lot of strangers, and even the parent doesn't know what's going on. I know my parents were very protective about me even getting on a plane to go to AnthroCon by myself. So that's why I had to bring a friend, and it's like, okay, who are you rooming with? How long are you staying? When are you coming back? Okay, perfect. We're going to text you every day. You better get back to us, otherwise you're not going again. So
that's legit parenting. I would do the same.
Right. So the first thing is you treat it as though you treat anything that your kids are into or doing. You keep the same safety measures out there. But the one thing I want to say, and I don't want to overspeak because you probably have
I think this is
too.
a perfect point for you.
So the biggest thing that we've experienced as parents and our kids is the transformation that happens to our children when they get to conventions. They go from maybe being a lot introverted and maybe not sure of themselves, and they have some other issues. They walk into a convention and suddenly they are surrounded by hundreds, possibly thousands of their tribe. So we have, the Young Furry Chill space that we actually take to some conventions. And it's really great because we get to sit in there and watch these relationships between young furries happen. Our children have developed relationships that have lasted so far years. You go to a sanctuary, you go where people aren't going to judge you. You can just love this stuff and be silly and happy and act this way, and it's accepted and encouraged. And we think that parents would do themselves a favor, especially really young furries, to go with them and go with an open mind and let your kid squeak and growl and wiggle their tails and be silly and just kind of be there to support if they need, but let them go be silly, watch it happen. It's amazing. It's amazing to watch.
And I will say the other side of that, and everything you said is spot on. I agree 100%. But since it is so overwhelming, sometimes it's a bit much for people. And it's also safe to say, it's a very safe community to say, like, I need space. I'm going to go sit in the corner. Maybe I'm going to cry a little bit. I'm not sad. I'm just working through all of these emotions. And it's such a supportive community that's okay. And for that kind of acceptance, it's beautiful. This is part of why we love the community and the fact that our children do come alive at those conventions, and we don't have to be with them and order their meals for them because they're too timid to speak, which is fine.
No, but at furry conventions, our kids go out and they step up, they talk to other people, they make they take the initiative to ask for pictures or a hug from someone. So, yeah.
I think as a parent, it has been gratifying for us to see our kids form these relationships.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
That's completely separate from our participation in the fandom, which we have a blast. We have different friend groups and all of that. To have our children feel confident to say, we're going to go hang out with our friends. We like their friends, it's really a beautiful thing. That's aside from the philanthropy, which is huge.
Right. But to go back to the First Science article and their information, the psychological and emotional benefits from being in this kind of friend group or family or fandom, whatever you want to say, it's actually so many positives to it that you kind of have to look at those and the scary things that might be out there. Just, put your safety plan in place, just like you would anywhere else.
Exactly. And that's honestly like the number one priority in anything that I encourage outside of going to conventions and going to meets is be safe. Always make sure you have someone with you. Even if it isn't for safety reasons, but for just emotional support, to at least know that you're not alone in a situation and you have someone to bounce back on. Like even
feeling safe is part of that, the emotional feeling safe and that it's okay for you to be who you are and wear a tail and not feel weird about it or isolated.
Yeah, like even I always look back on my example of going from where I was 2 years ago, roughly. It's almost been 2 years since I've been a furry or gone to my first convention. I went to Anthro New England 2018, which is a convention in Boston. It's local to me. That's what I would always encourage newer furries to try and do. Look for conventions near them, like build up that experience. Because what I did was I did a straight shot to a convention and went pretty much by myself, which not really something to encourage because you don't really know people. I didn't know anyone there besides Majira partially. I knew of him and I knew I was going to meet up with him and say hi to him, and that was it. Those are the only people I knew at that convention.
Wow.
But just seeing the transformation, just to think like if I hadn't joined the fandom, I wouldn't be at the point I am today where I'm running and hosting panels with hundreds of people coming by to see him. I'm making YouTube videos on a daily basis. I'm doing exceedingly well in public speaking compared to some of my peers in engineering, where the stereotype kind of is like, don't make eye contact with the engineers, you'll scare them. Sort of just with the social anxiety aspect, everyone is going to have different levels of it. Not being able to order food like you said with your kids, and just the fandom kind of encourages that social environment. Everyone has that sort of like step taking process where you just take it one step at a time, and each person has different levels of taking those steps. And just seeing the transformation over a year, even from my parents, they're like, who the hell are you? You're not my kid. Like, you don't do this. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I mean, I'll just public speak and go up to someone and just talk. Like, that's what I've sort of developed with my habits. And even though I'm naturally introverted, I know how to handle that. And I know what my limits are. And it is because of the fandom and these conventions and these communities that are created in my local area that I was able to do that.
Yeah, and I have to commend you because that's really brave. I don't think I could do it without Joelle, because I also am very introverted and I would just be too intimidated.
Well, our very first convention experience, thankfully, we had a young fur with us that kind of knew the ropes, because just the process of going to pre-reg or registration and knowing, okay, get a badge. Like, there is a process, and if you've not attended before, you don't know. So
it can be intimidating,
yeah. It's nice to have someone with you.
Yeah, and I know you guys asked about specifically the school aspect in the furry fandom and kind of balancing that, but I didn't know if you guys had any questions for me with regards to the school experience with being friends with furries in the fandom, or having friends, or even just, I guess, the bullying concern. That was one of actually my parents' main concerns, was that I was going to be bullied or ostracized for it, because people have their opinions on things, whether they have full knowledge of it or not. And some people, unfortunately, want to put others down for it. And
I
that's
think
a big
that's
factor.
interesting. And I know we need to wrap up, but I wanted to say, we have watched several of your streams, and I think that it's really interesting because you will often have roommates or classmates or friends.
I was going to say the same thing. Yeah, go
share one
ahead.
brain. Come in and hear you're streaming and talking about furry, and they seem not bothered by it at all, and that is really the ideal. That's as it should be.
Yeah.
Here's my roommate or my college classmate talking about whatever it is that they're interested in. I'm just going to go about my business, go get stuff off my desk. Maybe I'll say hi to the stream and interact a bit, but it isn't a big deal. And so for me, I think that's really nice that you seem to have that in your community where you are. When you stream, people are just like, okay, it's cool. It's Beta doing his thing. And
right. And unfortunately, bullying is out there. And if someone feels like they need to get their power by putting someone else down, they're going to find whatever it is. It's not very specific. It can be anything. They're going to find something. Yeah. So I feel like building up the defense to that and having, trying to build up self-worth and things like that to protect yourself against bullying in general is a good idea. But I don't think that you should stay away from something because you are afraid of a bullying situation.
I had a couple of points that I wanted to make with it, and actually an example. Because one of my younger cousins actually came to me after a family party, a family event, and talked to me about how she figured out who I was online and saw all my videos and was like, hey, can I ask you about some of this stuff? They were just concerned about the fandom stuff, and they were low-key a furry. They've kind of learned that they kind of had to do that in their school, and they're very young. They're still in middle school, going on to high school in a few years. But originally they were very open about being a furry, and I saw them kind of do that. And they kind of realized that, oh, I'm kind of not really being treated well by the girls and some of the guys, and I'm being picked on, or they're making fun of me, so I can't really show that, and I can't really doodle in my book, or I can't do this or that. And it kind of broke my heart a little bit, because they put the whole furry thing to the side when they were really passionate about it. And
it's unfortunate.
It was kind of beaten into them from, I guess, how their peers were, that it was a bad thing, which it isn't. It really isn't one of those things. It's a hobby that really does so much more good than people think. Just the one thing that I can encourage with it kind of goes back to the point of who you should really tell about it. And I think doing the simple doodling in a book, or wearing Hyena Agenda merch, which is the low-key furry merch, and just being chill about it, especially in the high school or school environment, younger school environment, is really important. Because with my environment, it's just mainly adults, and when adults are immature, it's ignorance that shows, and it looks bad upon the individual from other people's standpoints. But right. with the younger audience, with younger kids, they might not know, or they might not even care to know. They just see something online as being, cringy or bad or easy to make fun of because of what others say about it, and they'll stick with that. So I know you guys have to go.
We do. We have kids to pick up.
My phone call was my kid pickup call. So
I'm very sorry for keeping this very late. We've more or less gone over the questions that we wanted to go over, and I'll probably cut this down a bit to make it more suitable for everyone watching. Where can everyone here find you guys, either in YouTube, Twitter, whatever social media you guys have?
We are Moms of Furries on YouTube. We are at Moms of Furries on Twitter. We are Moms of Furries on Instagram. But we do have a website. It's MoFurries, MoFurries.com. And you can contact us through the website. It has our email and everything. We are at some conventions. We are always going to be at Anthro Northwest in Seattle in November.
Yeah.
And this year we will be at Furry Week in Atlanta in May and BLFC. So we generally attend as many cons as we can. So if a parent is planning to take their children to convention, they can contact us to see if we can be there to help them through it.
Yep. And we'd love to meet anybody and say hello and answer any questions they've got.
So they're free to reach out to us however they can get to us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And same goes for me. And I know you guys, if anyone has any questions about this video or any further topics in the fandom, any parents or any kids or anywhere in between, feel free to message me or email me. All my links are below, and so are the Moms of Furries. With that, I know you guys have to pick up your kids. This is much longer than I thought it would be, but do you guys have any final points you guys want to make or anything else you want to say to everyone?
We love you.
And thanks for having us. We are really happy to participate. So
of course. Thank you for helping me out with this. So this was an awesome video to make. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you have an awesome day. Follow the Moms of Furries on YouTube and Twitter and whatever you may like. Subscribe to them, all that, and stay life jacket, guys. Take care.